Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. The purpose of this webinar is to provide you some useful information on transportations and how to better service your patients that have transportation as a barrier to accessing healthcare. The webinar is going to last less than an hour. We'll give plenty of time for Q&A. And if you have any questions, there's a Q&A bubble on your screen. Feel free to ask us any questions there. And for whatever reason, if that plugin is not working on your page, you can email me directly with any questions at josho@angelflightwest.org. And I'll get into that a little bit. So who are we and why are we doing this webinar? My name is Josh Olson. I'm the Executive Director of Angel Flight West. We are a group that arranges free air transportation for people needing access to healthcare or for other compelling human reasons. We arrange these via donated flights by private pilots and commercial airline partners that donate all the costs of transporting patients to and from treatment. Yes, there is no catch. It's not too good to be true. We've got pilots that love to fly and are always looking for good reasons to fly, and we happen to have the best reason to fly. So they donate their passion and money and skill to fly people where they need to get to. And we do over 4,000 flights per year for people traveling across the western half of the United States. And we've got partners around the rest of the United States that do similar things. We'll get into some of those resources later. But the reason that we're doing this is specifically because we know that, according to health outreach partners, that transportation is the biggest barrier to accessing healthcare, only after cost. There's different groups doing this in different iterations, from ground transportation to buses to trains. We're in the air transportation business, and there isn't really a map or a single place of reference that you can go to find all those things. So as we try to serve more people and reach more the need out there, which we know there's much more than we're currently serving, we're learning that a lot of folks just don't know about it, don't know how to access us, aren't aware of the services. And so we're trying to step into that space and give those sort of resources. So that's what this is about. Full disclosure, we don't know everything about this. We have a good sense of the climate out there and the need for transportation because we get hundreds of calls every day looking for that. And if we can't service them, we try to plug them into the best resource possible. So we wanted to host these webinars, one, so that those that need our services can help them, but two, if there's other services, we want to be the facilitator for those, because at the end of the day, we're trying to serve patients who need to get to life-changing healthcare that many of you are providing at no cost or at a reasonable cost to allow you guys to do what you do best, which is help people along their journey to health and hope. So we are the bridge that travels that gap between home and health. So that's why we're doing this. Feel free again to ask any questions along the way. I don't like listening to my own voice, so I'd much rather hear yours, and so we can tackle this problem together. So I mentioned a bit about our agenda already. We're going to go a little bit over charitable aviation, common reasons for patient travel, type of travel, and some resources for each type. We'll tell some patient stories, so there's some real-world application here. You can kind of see how this fits into the bigger picture. We'll talk about spreading the word. Awareness is the biggest issue facing us and other charitable transportation resources. And then we'll have plenty of time for question and answers. And then at the close of this webinar, we'll provide some resources that we can email you in an ebook that provides some kind of handy-dandy one-stop shopping in terms of arranging free air transportation. So charitable aviation, I touched on it a little bit. And charitable aviation in the U.S. takes many forms. Many charitable aviation organizations are existing across the country to help people who need travel to medical treatment. I mentioned us, Angel Flight West. We cover the western half of the U.S., so picture the Rockies and west, Montana down to New Mexico and west, including Alaska and Hawaii. Then we've got partners across the rest of the country. There's an Angel Flight South Central, Angel Flight Central, Angel Flight East, Angel Flight Northeast, Angel Flight Mid-Atlantic, Angel Flight Southeast. And then there's some other groups within that too that provide help, and we'll get into those different resources as we go along. Again, as I touched on, the transportation is provided by individuals. These individuals are private pilots who are donating their airplane or renting an airplane to travel the patient where they need to go. There is no cost to the patient. There is no cost to insurance. There's no cost to the hospital. We're providing these out of the generosity of our private pilots and our commercial airline partners. Our major commercial airline partner is Alaska Airlines, and where their routes fly. Specifically, we fly a lot within the state of Alaska, or Alaska traveling to the lower 48. We get a lot of requests from Hawaii, where Alaska flies, because of limited healthcare resources out there to flying them to other parts in the West Coast. There are resources with JetBlue for Angel Flight Northeast. Angel Flight Central has resources with Southwest Airlines, and then a group called National Patient Travel Service that we work with has lots of resources for American Airlines. Similarly, the Mercy Medical Angels have rail and bus services, taxis that are donated, all coordinated by these organizations. So there's a lot of resources out there for you and your patients that are needing access to healthcare. Just a little bit about us. We've been in business for a little more than 35 years. Across the country, we're flying 10,000 flights per year, have flown over 200,000 flights in the history of charitable aviation in the U.S. More than 6,000 volunteers ready to help, and we have availability across the United States, as I mentioned. And we're here to help. We're here to serve others, and we want to do more of that. In terms of how we work specifically, is we do have some qualifications. So these are limited resources, and we want to make sure our pilots are going to those that can most use our services. So we do require some sort of financial need or other compelling consideration. We don't, ask for IRS or tax returns at all. We're taking a third party, typically a healthcare professional, that says, yes, this person has a significant financial need to accessing healthcare. And that financial need can take different forms. A middle-class person that has a major medical crisis, as you well know, that can quickly deplete your finances if you're unable to work, if you have a family, on down the list. So that might be the financial need. You might know that they're on Medi-Cal or some sort of assisted insurance. You might know if they're uninsured. All those things we would qualify as significant financial need. Even if typically people would say, well, they were a lawyer and they had a good job and so forth. We know that there's other considerations there, and we rely on our requesters or healthcare professionals to vet those needs for us. The qualifications aren't strict, but it's clear that the patient's need is worthy of the donation. Another thing that we often run into is someone that is immunocompromised. They can't travel on a commercial aircraft, or they can't, go on a bus, or a car ride is a significant hardship for them physically. Those are areas where we step into. What we want to reflect to our volunteer pilots and to our commercial airline partners is that without this service, it would be a significant hardship for that person that would justify these thousands of dollar donations, basically, that the pilots are giving to get people to and from where they need to go. So what are the types of travel needs? Obviously, in emergency situations, we're talking about air ambulances or airlifts to receive your hospital. And most of you know how that works, but we'll get into that a little bit. A lot of time people are given, bad news that their particular illness or their situation is not looking good. So they're looking for a second opinion. They're looking for something else. So they're traveling to see those. Specialized treatments or surgeries, as specialty areas in healthcare become more disparate, there's oftentimes need for transportation to get to a specialized surgery or treatment, the best in the world type of thing. Regular appointments for clinical trials or treatment of rare diseases, same thing. A lot of these folks are have not been given many other options except for a clinical trial of a drug for their particular illness. Well, those are usually only held at research hospitals or universities that might not be close to them, so our transportation can help them get there. Rare diseases, and we're not just for patient, by the way. Oftentimes, a loved one needs to travel someone to be a caretaker or be with them in end stages. We do domestic violence relocation. We fly special needs kids for camps. There's different reasons that we view as compelling that that fall into that category of health and hope, because we know that all healing doesn't happen in a hospital. So types of patients and options for transportation vary based on the patient's situation. Emergencies. We touched on this earlier. Airlifts and other emergencies are handled by state and local authorities and are usually not coordinated by hospital personnel. There's a major emergency, people are ready to respond in a quick fashion, whether that be an air ambulance, a helicopter, whatever the lift is, they're getting them out of there right away. And then one step down from that is an air ambulance for hire. So the patient is really sick, has to be laid down all the time, needs constant medical care. That's going to fall into the category of an air ambulance. And there are air ambulance companies that work with insurance or the individuals for that service. And in some cases, the insurance will cover the air ambulance, or at least partially. And if you have been involved with those, you know that those are incredibly expensive. And that's because, you know, they've got a crew standing by, they've got a special type of aircraft that's outfitted for that. So you're paying for all those premiums. Then you've got a different set of patients that are medically stable and ambulatory. So these are the ones that might be going to the clinical trial or the second opinion or a surgery or pre and post transplant appointment. These folks, you know, can get in and out of a small aircraft. You know, they can travel relatively easily, but they're still sick and they need access to that specialized treatment. And then we talked about that other category that kind of falls outside of this. These are caregivers or family members traveling to be with a loved one, or perhaps a doctor or nurse practitioner that is donating their services to go out into an underserved community to care for an underserved population. You know, that might be someone that would be eligible for a flight that could see multiple people at one time. So travel varies, right? You've got everything from local travel. I'm sure you see patients that have a hard time accessing your treatment, even though they live a couple blocks away. Someone that's elderly or that you know, can't get around that well, that's a barrier for them. We got international. We get calls all the time for something that's happening internationally that they need to come to the U.S. because, you know, we're among the best in healthcare, and they're trying to gain access to that. Domestic long distance, that would be, you know, kind of a cross-country type of flight. That is a need on occasion. Someone needs to get to an area of excellence, and it's located across the country. And then regionally, you know, like within the West or within a state or over 100 miles, that type of thing. There's different travel. So local travel, resources available. These are the scenario I just described. Can't get down the block, can't get across town, even if the facility is only a few miles away. And those resources for local travel vary greatly from community to community. And for those of you that aren't familiar with Health Outreach Partners, they put out a great study about transportation as barrier. I referenced them in the beginning for that source, that transportation is the biggest barrier to healthcare after cost. I would recommend checking them out. They've done a lot of this groundwork already. There's also a lot of disease support groups in this area that have done some work. You know, American Cancer Society has their volunteer matching program that gets volunteer drivers to drive kind of across town so people can access treatment. And there's other programs like that. And again, that's community to community. I imagine if you're in a hospital and you might already know some of those resources, but if you don't, those are some good resources to go. And the ebook that we're going to send after this will have some recommendations on how to find those resources in your area. So unfortunately, in the international scenario for travel, there are very few options for no-cost travel to and from locations outside the United States. There's an Angel Flight group, for example, that fly people from the Caribbean to Florida. There's a group called the Flying Samaritans that I know fly some flights in and out of Mexico. And there are actually other Angel Flight type organizations in places like Canada, Australia, so forth. But those are typically flying within those areas and not outside of those areas, so they're not doing international flights. Domestic long distance, these long distance travels I talked about that are non-emergency, and you get some more notification. I mentioned our relationship with Alaska Airlines. We also have a relationship with Hawaiian Airlines. And I mentioned the other groups that had relationships with JetBlue, with Southwest Airlines, and with American Airlines. And a good resource for that is Patient Travel Center. You can see the website there, patienttravel.org. Another great one for that is Miracle Flights. So miracleflights.org is a group that handles commercial flights across the country too. It used to be Miracle Flights for kids, but now they service all ages. So that's another good resources for you and your patients when looking for long distance. I know some of you get vouchers from Southwest Airlines. That's a good resource for kind of domestic long distance. And so those are kind of the players in play. And again, if you call us or refer to the ebook or go to the Air Care Alliance page, they'll have a lot of those listed in there. So domestic regional, this is people who need specialized treatment but could find it kind of within 1,000 miles of their home. And this is the sweet spot for us, Angel Flight West, and other volunteer pilot organizations, because this is kind of the distance that these private planes can fly without taking multiple days and so forth. And these really are for scheduled appointments that you have more than 5 days in advance notice, and that patient is medically stable and ambulatory. And what we mean by that is they need limited assistance getting on and off one of these small planes, which can include, a 2-foot step up to a strut, and you have to kind of walk up on a wing and lower yourself in. So there is some ambulation that needs to happen, and medically stable that they'd be okay on a small flight like this. Some people have oxygen concentrators, that type of thing is okay, or just a real minor drip that you can handle on your own. Those things are okay. But if there's no medical care on board, these are, think of it kind of more of a taxi service. This is a volunteer driver that's going to fly them where they need to go, so they need to be okay on there. So in terms of how we work, and we can get into opportunities like this, that the travel we schedule specifically for your patient. So we've got some forms online and paperwork that we get where we get information. And how we arrange it is we go to the nearest small airport to your home. So I think most people think of air transportation as long distances to a major commercial airline hub. And there's 20 times more small airports than there are commercial airports. So, let's say your patient lives in a rural Nevada, in Winnemucca. They don't have to drive to Reno or to Salt Lake City to access care. There's a little airport right there in Winnemucca where we could pick them up and fly them, to Stanford and Palo Alto, or to Renown Health Center in Reno even, or Swedish Hospital, in a difference in Utah or Colorado. So those are the types of things that are good for charitable aviation. And then we take them to the nearest airport close to that treatment. So if they're going to Stanford, there's a little airport there in Palo Alto that we fly in. We wouldn't fly into Oakland International or San Francisco in that scenario. Although if we were going to UCSF, for example, we'd fly into the major Oakland airport that has a general aviation side. And of course, if it's with one of our commercial airline partners, then they are to those major commercial hubs. And we're really scheduling this flight around your patient's appointment. So if that patient's appointment is 3 weeks out and it's on a Friday and they're 150 miles and the appointment's in the middle of the day, chances are we could fly there in the morning, drop off the patient, and fly them back in the afternoon. If it's a longer distance or it's a longer appointment, we typically fly the day before or a half day before and have the patient do an overnight stay and fly them home the next day or whenever they're done with their treatment. Most often, like I said, these flights are in small airplanes. So if you picture, 4 to 6 seats inside an airplane with a single engine, it's kind of the size of a small car. That's the type of resources we're dealing with. Now, many times we fly the passenger with a companion. So they've got someone that's coming along with them, whether it be a spouse or if it's a child, a parent, or sometimes both parents. We can accommodate companions, but keep in mind these are small airplanes, so it's a little bit like a physics problem. We have a weight and balance component to this that airplanes can only take off with a certain amount of weight. So we're never going to fly in unsafe conditions, whether it be weather or weight considerations. So the best recipe for success in that scenario is 2 or less passengers and a total of 400 or less pounds. Once we get above that, we can certainly try to accommodate those needs, but the amount of available volunteer pilots and types of aircraft that can accommodate that start to shrink once you get above that. We also arrange some ground transportation in certain areas. So that's a request that you can make if the patient can't navigate, an urban transportation system or doesn't have the resources to do that. We do have some volunteer drivers that meet that and some other resources that we can utilize. So once we get all that information and get all that vetted, including a financial need and medical release, we then post that on a website and we look for volunteer pilots who are willing and able to fly that flight. If it matches the commercial airline section, we book that commercial airline ticket with the passenger and give them all that information so they have it. In the volunteer pilot scenario, once we found that match, we notify you and the patient, and then we connect the pilot directly with the passenger because that's kind of what we do here. We're just matching a volunteer with the need. We find the need, we match the volunteer pilot, then we step up and have the two of them talk. So the pilot coordinates with the passenger where they're going to meet, exactly how to get there, what to expect on the flight, what to bring, that kind of thing. Meet them there, take them to the airport closest to the facility, drop them off. They go get their treatment. Typically, it's a different pilot that brings them home. If you or the passenger needs to cancel at any time, that's totally okay. We understand. In fact, almost a third of our flights end up canceling because of the passenger need changes. They're too sick to fly, their white blood cell count isn't high enough, their appointment changed. You guys had to cancel the appointment because the clinical trial that week, wasn't going on, or the clinic appointments that you had for a particular disease or group had to be rescheduled. Whatever the case might be, we cancel and try to reschedule. There are occasions where we need to cancel. We are as pretty close to a guaranteed thing as you get. We complete more than 90% of our flights when the patient isn't canceling. But occasionally there's those situations where there's really bad weather and we're not going to fly into unsafe conditions, or it's in an area or a time of year that we can't find a volunteer pilot to get there, and we couldn't find another resource to get you there. So we do recommend having a backup plan or the ability to be flexible and reschedule to maximize the opportunity to get there. And we work with you all along the way, so you can contact us anytime and talk to us about that or get an update and that kind of thing. So we work with you through that process. So I mentioned a medical release. We do require a medical release be signed by patient's physician or nurse practitioner that says the patient's okay to fly in a small non-pressurized airplane and have that level of ambulation that we talked about. You can see that plane right there in the middle picture with a wing. That's often what you're stepping up on and getting into an airplane like that. These are types of flights we fly. We also fly blood and tissue. As you can see on that flight on the left, we've got boxes of blood and tissue because, flying that versus driving it in a van increases the viability and usefulness of plasma and that type of thing. So if your hospital has some program like that, or of somebody in your area, that's something that we could help with, you can put them in touch with us. So the medical release is also going to say these patients are okay to fly, in an unpressurized airplane at altitude. So as doctors well know, at different altitudes, your body reacts differently. So sometimes for cardio patients or if you've got blood pressure issues, that type of thing, or oxygen, getting enough oxygen type of issues, that's a consideration for these planes that, the pilot needs to fly them at the safe altitudes for the area they're in, and that can affect a patient. So that's part of the medical release that we want to know that that's the case. And we also want to know that they're going to be safe inside the airplane. So if they have grand mal seizures, or if they have some sort of PTSD or something, we'll want to know that that condition isn't going to affect the safety of the small aircraft. because we are a safety-first organization. So requesting a charitable flight, I touched on this earlier. If you have a patient that needs to travel to and from a medical appointment, make sure the patient meets the criteria, and that's on our website and on our requester packet that we provide to any healthcare facility that wants it. And then you contact the organization or area. For those of you who are in the western half of the U.S., you contact us, Angel Flight West. Otherwise, you can call us and we'll refer you to it, or you can refer to that ebook that we're referencing. The other group that you can talk to there is called the Air Care Alliance, that has a whole listing of different charitable aviation groups across the country. And you can always call us. We're not an answering tree. You get a live person every time that you call us that can walk you through and help you through the process. And we'll provide our number here at the end, but it's 888-4-AN-ANGEL or 888-426-2643. Or if you want to save everybody money, you can call us at 310-390-2958. And we also have a request online, www.angelflightwest.org. And there in the middle tab, it says request a flight. You click on that and it'll go through all the information we need to make sure you A, qualify for a flight, and B, the information we need to arrange those flights with the volunteer pilot or the commercial airline partner. And we ask that when you do call us, have as much information as possible, or if you don't know the information you need, just call us and have us send you a requester packet, and that'll have all the information we need on there. That includes the date and time of the appointment, name and contact of the physician who can provide the medical release, the passenger's weight, the list of companions and their weight, etc. So here's some practical examples of patients helped by Angel Flight West. That cute little girl with the doll next to her name is Talia. She has leukemia and lives in St. George, Utah, which is a rural part of Utah. And she needed to go to Salt Lake City. So you'd think, oh, St. George to Salt Lake City, that's a few hour drive. They can do that. Well, that works great until you have to do it repeated times with a sick kid in your back seat and your other spouse is working and you as a mom are driving, and you're having to pull over every 45 minutes to help Talia throw up. That can deplete both you and Talia really quickly. Can also deplete your finances really quickly. So that was a situation where they found out about Angel Flight, and we were there to get her there and back in a day before the effects of chemo set in, so they could be sick in the comfort of her own home with her doll and her toys and all that kind of stuff around her. So we were able to ease that burden for her to get her to and from treatment. And I want to use this as an example of, again, people think of air transportation as a need as long distance, but many of you live in states where you're in an urban area and your patients are traveling from rural areas. Even if it's only 65, 75, 100 miles away, that's often a significant challenge because they don't have reliable ground transportation, or both parents are working or something like that. There's a little boy in Show Low, Arizona that we were flying, whose mom and dad had to work to keep the family going, and grandma was taking him to treatment. They didn't have a car, so the Children's Hospital was trying to arrange a cab through their insurance, and that was 2.5 hour drive each way, and he was going there 3 times a week for dialysis while he was waiting for his transplant. That was a perfect example where our pilots stepped in and got him there in the same day 3 times a week. That really took the burden off that family. Here's another example with Noah. He was born with Morquio type A, which some of you know is a rare and serious birth defect. He was accepted into a trial medication at Oakland Children's, but he lived in Porterville. So here's another case where it's relatively shorter distance, but thanks to our pilot, he was able to get to fly to every month to receive treatment via this clinical trial. Xavier is a little boy who was a burn survivor. And again, we fly all ages. These are just some examples that we had. And his parents had used their savings to get him the care that he needed at Denver Children's Hospital Burn Center. But they lived in a rural part of Colorado, and traveling through that mountainous state can be very challenging. Angel Flight volunteers stepped in to help so that transportation could be one less thing that the family has to worry about. So this is where it comes into kind of next steps for you. We hear, unfortunately, way too often that someone couldn't get to medical treatment, or treatment or getting to their treatment took significant toll on their body and their recovery process because travel is too difficult or expensive. We want to reach these people. Our partners at UCLA and Ronald McDonald Children's House have shared their data with us compared to our data in terms of the people we're serving flying to their care, and we know that we're serving less than 5% of that need, and most of that's just because there's a lack of awareness. So we would hope that you'd forward this ebook to your department. If you want a in-service presentation to your facility or in the West, we're happy to set that up. If you're somewhere else, we're happy to put you in touch with the folks that could potentially make that in-service presentation. If you've got a healthcare conference, clinical trial coordinators, you name it, if we can get this word in front of them, or if you can forward along this presentation to them, we're happy to help. So on the Q&A, I've got a few questions. It's looking like I'm not seeing my Q&A box pop up here, so I want to just make sure that there haven't been any else. If anyone has a question right now and wants to email it, they can email it to me at josho@angelflightwest.org. I do have some questions here. If you have a question, the Q&A icon, if it's in there, you can open that in your chat window. I know sometimes the Google Talk client gets finicky with this. So if it's not showing, here's the kind of instructions there to type that up. Or again, feel free to email me at josho@angelflightwest.org, and I can pull those questions up too. But here's a few questions. One here, how many times can a patient travel? That's a great question. So, I mentioned the little boy we were flying from Show, Arizona to Phoenix, Arizona. We were doing him 3 times a week. There is no limit to times a patient can travel. We can travel for repeated appointments and so forth. If it gets to be an everyday type of thing, that's going to be when we're starting to tap out our resources. But you can call us, and depending on the area, we may be able to set up regular travel like we did for the little boy in Sholo. But there is no set limit. We're working with our resources and our volunteers to make sure what we can do is feasible. So you can just contact us and we'll work with you. But there's no cap, so to speak, on number of times a patient can travel. Next question, is there a limit to certain types of illnesses? No, we don't have age or illness limit. We take things on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, if the illness was such that they couldn't travel with the qualifications that we mentioned, that would be a challenge that we wouldn't be able to meet. But we fly all types of illnesses, all types of people, so there's no limits there. Can a passenger request directly? That answer is yes and no. The passenger can definitely fill out an online request form. They can call us and give us lots of information. But those pieces of information that we require from the healthcare facility is that medical release and that financial need verification, and verifying that they're traveling for treatment there. Again, those are things that we want to verify to protect safety, to make sure that our resources are being used appropriately, et cetera. So that's how that works. Let's see. Can you, what is that? Oh, can you visit my facility and present to my colleagues? Yes, we're happy to do in-service presentations anytime, or if you want to do it virtually, we're happy to do that as well, to know how our resources work. I know you are inundated as healthcare professionals with all these different resources, whether it be gas cards or Southwest vouchers or Shriners vans or whatever the case might be. I know you've got to navigate that, and I've seen the trend in some facilities to go to a transportation coordinator, and if that's the case, we're happy to work with them because we do fit a very specific niche, but we can serve a lot of those needs. But I think a lot of people, it's forget about us, or it's obtuse or whatever. But yes, we're happy to come and present anytime. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, oh, are small planes safe? Yes, actually, statistically, air transportation is the safest mode of transportation. Small planes have to be meticulously inspected every year. They go through an annual inspection. Pilots go through checklists every time to make sure that the plane is safe before they take off every time. So it is a very safe mode of transportation. A lot of our passengers have shared that they actually feel safer in the smaller plane because they see the pilot, they can talk to him or her, and they know what's going on. So they get that feeling of safety when that happens, which is, ideal, obviously. And we also hear from patients that the flights themselves become part of their healing process. They get an opportunity to kind of be away from the stress and worries of the everyday life and get literally up above the clouds where they can pray or relax or meditate or whatever the case might be. Many of them end up falling asleep. And the fact that a volunteer person is making time out of their busy lives to come alongside them and literally share the cockpit with them for several hours. That is really the reason why our pilots love doing it, and the feedback we get often from patients, even that don't have necessarily life-changing or life-saving outcomes, but we're giving them extended health and hope during their time of need, which is why we do it and why we love it. Okay. Any final questions? All right. Well, hearing none, if you want more information, or if you have a passenger right now that you're interested in, you can visit this website, angelflightwest.org/passengers. You can also visit the group I've mentioned several times in here called Air Care Alliance. There's www.aircarealliance.org. That's a resource directory of charitable aviation groups across the country. We will send that ebook out to here, as well as a link to this presentation that you can view in the future if there's something you forgot or you wanted to pass it along. We would appreciate that. And you can contact us anytime at that number, which is 888-4-ANGEL or 310-390-2958. And we're happy to answer any questions like that. If you're less about online requests and want a requester packet, you can call us and we'll fax you our requester packet that we need to arrange flights. And we really thank you for your time. Thank you for what you're doing. We see and hear stories every day from the patients we serve at the awesome care and treatment they're receiving at your facilities. And our whole goal is to help get them there more and reach more people. So if you have a patient that could use our services or other volunteer transportation services, please let us know, let the respective organization know, because we are here to support you and your patients. And we want to see people everyone having access to health and hope. And in our ideal world, that we would totally remove transportation as a barrier to accessing that health and hope. So we thank you very much for your time. Thank you for your webinar and helping me as I fumble through this process. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. If not, keep up the great work, and we'll talk to you soon.